Good morning, student. Welcome to my class. Today we are going to learn BS second year optional English paper 4 Partition Literature. Module 1 and causes and effect of the partition. In our last lecture we also learned about the historical and political background of 1947 partition. Today we are going to learn causes of partition. The partition of Hindustan into the Hindu India and the Muslim Pakistan was a complex historical process. It had its roots, though indistinct, in the invention of the age of the Arabs and Muslims and the arrival of the Europeans, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British to India. The earlier invaders, mainly the Aryans, the Kushans, the Greeks, had merged into the indigenous Indian society. Muslim, on the other hand, didn't merge into the Indian society, but they tried to convert the original Indians into their religion. The Europeans never thought of settling in India. They had come to exploit India of its riches and wealth. They had their homelands. So after India's independence, they went back to their homeland. In the book The Great Divide, H.U. Hudson's regard the partition as a triangular issue among Britain, Pakistan and India. We find mainly 3 points of view in the writing of the imperialist Indian and Pakistani writers. Their writing throw light on the different aspects of the partition. We can deduce that the three factors that led to the partition were communalism, nationalism, and imperialism. Besides these three major factors, cultural issues, loss of harmony among different religions and creeds, favoritism, and nepotism. On the part of the rulers were also responsible for the partition of the Indian subcontinent. So there is a three causes of partition of India. First one is a communalism, second one is nationalism, and third one is imperialism. So communalism means differentiating people on the basis of religion. It is the mingling of religion with politics for non-religious motives. It has some definite vested interest underlining it. Communalism was one of the reasons in the creation of Pakistan. Its roots are found in the colonial rule. Earlier, both the communities, the Hindu and the Muslims, had lived in the harmony with each other. We are actually study that in our historical and political background of the partition literature. They had fought together against other rulers and then against the British. For them, religion was not a barrier at all, but the British used communalism as a tool of the political power game. Using it, they emphasized the different identities of Hindus and Muslims, the socio-economic differences between the two communities, and the vested interest of the allied leaders contributed much to the divide between the Hindus and the Muslims. In other words, we can say that Pakistan was not a creation of religious bigotry, but it was a creation of the modernists among the Muslims. The most important among them were Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and poet Iqbal and M.A. Jinnah. They were the creator of the partition of Pakistan and India. They also their rule is the most important in the partition of India and Pakistan. The beginning of a conscious communal awareness is first noted in Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's speeches. He was the first modernist Muslim who noticed that the Muslim community had remained aloof from Western education and hence away from jobs under the British government. He thought his community would lag behind the Hindus who had got a job. He urged the Muslims to join hands with the British and remain away from the Congress, which to him was a Hindu organization. He, in a way, sowed the seeds of separatist politics of the Muslim in India. He tried to mobilize the Muslim through the establishment of institutions like the Muhammad Anglo-Oriental College, later known as the Aligarh Muslim University, and Muslim Educational Council. The poet Muhammad Iqbal laid a solid base for the idea of a separate homeland for the Muslims. The creation of Pakistan, which involved the partition of Eastwhile India, says Harbinder Pal Singh, who says Harbinder Pal Singh says the creation of Pakistan, which involved the partition of Eastwhile India, was the achievement of a single man, namely Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Harbinder Pal Singh says about the Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he was the creation of Pakistan, which involved the partition of Eastwhile India, and that is his achievement. Jinnah fully exploited Islam for political ends. In his hands, moderate communalism attained the stage of extreme communalism. Though in the beginning he was a secularist in a politics and a staunch supporter of Hindu-Muslim amity, he put forth the two nations theory and demanded a separate homeland for the Muslims. Separate homeland for the Muslims. The demand for separate electorates 1960 to a separate homeland 1946 was a rapid development towards the partition. The adamant views of the Congress leaders and the growing Hindu communalism under RSS. Its full form is a Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. It is in Hindi language. So in English we call also Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, and Hindu Mahasabha were also responsible for widening the gulf between the Hindus and the Muslims. Their insistence on the Hindu Raj and the glorification of the Hindu race and culture created hostility between the two communities. The ghost of the Hindu Raj haunted the Muslim psyche. The Muslim leaders thought that the democratic rule of majority meant the Hindu rule, so they used their religion for their vested interest of the Muslim leader thought that the democratic rule of majority meant the Hindu rule, so they used their religion for their vested interest of political ends. Besides the activity of the Muslim League, the appeasement policy of the Muslims adopted by the Congress also provided favorable ground for the isolationist and aggressive policy of the Muslim League. The Congress hoped rather falsely that the communal problem could be averted. In a way, the Congress leaders failed to understand the Muslim character and committed blunder. In 1960, as per the Lucknow Pact, they accepted the principle of franchise for the Muslims, and then they accepted the communal electorates system in 1932. The greatest blunder that the Congress leader committed was that they thought that from political, economical, geographical and military point of view, Pakistan would be a weak government. It would be an unstable government and it would soon be merged into India. This was a totally false optimism on the part of the Congress leaders. So there we also study the communalism. The next second one cause is nationalism. Nationalism means a strong feeling of love and pride in one's own country. It also expresses a desire for political independence from a foreign rule. In this sense, the nationalism developed in India during the colonial rule. It was under the impact of British imperialism that the spirit of nationalism rose in the breast of Indians. At the same time, the spread of modern education through English, the rapid development of the means of transport and communication, the role of journalism and the changing socio-economic structure helped to strengthen Indian nationalism. The Indian Nationalism Congress founded in 1885 began to mobilize the Indian masses in its insistence to colonialism. In the beginning, the Congress was somewhat obscure and unclear about its goal, but very soon its motto became the attainment of Swaraj or self-government. There was a steady growth of nationalist spirit under the Congress, but it was paralleled by the communal spirit of the Muslims League. The Congress upheld the principle of democratic rule, and the Muslim League concluded that the majority rule would be the Hindu rule. Besides, the Congress was using Hindu symbolism and mythology to promote the movement against the British. This shade of Hinduism sowed the seeds of suspicion among the Muslims. The Congress didn't accept the Muslim League as the sole representative of the Muslims in India. All these things led to widening the gulf between the Hindus and the Muslims. At the same time, there was a personality clash between Nehru and Jinnah. Mahatma Gandhi tried to bridge the gulf by going beyond the boundaries of narrowness and communalism, but in the last stages of the freedom movement, he was sidelined by his followers. Finally, the Congress leaders agreed to the partition. Mahatma Gandhi's all effort for Hindu-Muslims amity and united India were futile. So there is two causes we also study. One is the communalism and nationalism, and third one is the imperialism. Okay, we are going to imperialism. The British imperialism also played its mischievous role in the partition of India. The British came for business purpose to India, but gradually they replaced trade by politics. The economic exploitation of India was replaced by the white man's burden. The white man's burden theory, in order to continue their dominance, in order to achieve their ends, the British adopted the policy of divide and rule. They set the roots of their empire by creating fissures in the Indian soil as well as in other colonial in the world. Fissures, here fissures mean differentiate. Okay. by creating differences between the Hindus and the Muslims, to use Edward W. Said's words. They permanently scared and distorted Indian life. Of course, there were differences in the way of life of Hindus and the Muslims, but they were living together in harmony with each other. But the British government played them up against each other to suit their ends. At first, they went for the census survey, and people were differentiated on the basis of their religion. At the time of the 1857 revolt, both the communities had fought together against the British rule. The Muslims regarded the British as their enemies, as they had taken over from them as rulers. At the time, the British favored the Hindus. Later, when the Hindus began to resist the colonial rule, the British began to favor the Muslims. They understood that they could rule India safely by creating gulf between the Hindus and the Muslims. They helped the Muslims to set up their institutions like the Aligarh University and try to keep them away from the Congress activities. Sir Theodore Morrison highlighted this point in his essay written in 1932 that the Hindus and the Muslims were two distinct nations. He further stressed that the Muslim civilization could not survive under an aligned government, that is the Indian government. Of course, the beginning of the two nations theory had its roots in the conscious divisions of Bengal. In order to provide platform for the Muslims, the British government supported the press and financed Down and the Muslim League weekly. It gave communal concessions to the Muslims. It gave the Muslims a separate electorate. Even during the final stage of power transfer, it fixed the deadline for the transfer of power and hastened the process of the partition. Then, the announcement of the partition and upplanned strategy of the Boundary Commission led to the holocaust of masses who were not ready for migration. To conclude, we can say that the activities of the Muslims League, the policy of appeasement of the Congress, the polarization of Hindus and Muslims and Hindu communalism, Congress policy of strengthening India, expected formations of weak Pakistan, problems arising out of the transfer of power, and the mischievous policy of divide and rule of the colonial government, messy, hasty and clumsy, improvised Britons exist from India. All these factors were responsible for the partition of India. So, they will learn about the causes of the partition of India and Pakistan. Okay, student? Thank you.